Hey guys, welcome to Keep On Pushing TV. I am your host, Devon Harris, and of course, you know what we do here. We like to share ideas and insights that are going to help you live your absolute best life. So if that's something you're interested in, man, you're in the right place, so welcome. Today, we have an amazing guest. This guy has one of the most illustrious careers out there. He is been a competitive skier for over 20 years. 9 of those years were spent on the US ski team from 1983 to 1992. And he is considered Colorado's most decorated skier. So during that time, the guy has bagged 6 US National Moguls Championship, and he's added a pro championship just for fun. He's won 12 individual World Cup titles and was a World Cup, overall World Cup champion in 1988, and he repeated it again in 1992. Of course, he's an Olympian, 2-time Olympian, 1988 and 1992, where he won a bronze medal in moguls. One of the coolest guys you'll ever meet, and I'm so happy to be able to welcome Nelson, the Moguls man, I call him, Carmichael, to the show. Nelson, welcome, man. Good to have you.
Hey, thank you so much, Devon. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting to hear and see your podcast. It's exciting. So thank you.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you. The last time I saw you, we were in Kyrgyzstan, and actually we had Tom Whitaker on the show before, and I always actually recount the story of the day we went skiing in Kyrgyzstan, and I admit that I am king of the bunny slope. That's my comfort, my comfort spot right there. And so I was on the bunny slope, felt good. I wanted something a little bit more challenging, and I saw you coming off the hill. I'm like, hey, how is that hill over there? Oh, it's fine, and it's steep in some places. And me with my type A personality should have deduce that if you think it's steep in some places, it may be a little too steep for me. But I didn't. I ran up on the hill, I got on the ski lift, I'm like, ooh, bad idea. It was disastrous, and Tom Whitaker was so kind, he stayed with me until the ski lift closed and we got rescued. And I mean, it's just so unfair to you because Caroline, your wife, would she just gave you hell, but no hard feelings, man.
Yeah, you did all right. I know we were busy with the kids that day too, and but you wanted to go up there and make some turns and see if you could do it, which was awesome.
Well, I guess you have to stretch out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but Nelson, when I look at the Olympics, I would argue, and I'm guessing that there are other people would agree with me that skiing has changed and has grown way more than any other sport. There are so many different styles and disciplines, and perhaps the most revolutionary of them is your discipline, moguls. Now, when I look at bobsledding and the history of bobsledding, it goes back more than 100 years, back to 1890. But moguls, man, you were instrumental in the development of that discipline. You were right there at the genesis of it. So first of all, what does it feel like to have this really unique place in the history of your sport? And what were the dynamics that existed back then that gave rise to moguls?
Well, I mean, I feel like I was part of really a second wave of the genesis of the sport. Really, in the 70s, it had a big heyday. Freestyle had a big popular heyday where a lot of people wanted to do freestyle other than racing. That was kind of the other competition venue at the time, was you could do alpine racing around the gates, but this idea of freestyle that you could do whatever you wanted. You could do mogul runs and you could do jumps and you could kind of create and showcase your own style for judges. That was a whole new wave, and it got really, really popular in the 70s, and I was pretty young then. And so I wasn't a part of that, but I would hear stories about it, and some of the coaches that I started to work with, they were involved in that era. And so when we came through, it was kind of a whole new push to become an Olympic sport. So the that previous wave in the early 70s was professional. It was just kind of wild and crazy, and they were out for prize money and win cars and get on TV, and it was just all about having fun. But they ended up being popular. But then as that kind of faded down a little bit, there were some concerns that maybe it was a little too wild and crazy, and hey, we need to have some more training, and we need to take this more seriously, and maybe we can someday get into the Olympics with this sport. So that was more the era that I was with, so that it became under the wing of the FIS, the International Ski Federation, just like the other big disciplines like alpine racing. And so we got under their umbrella and had a World Cup season, and then started to have world championships within the year, and kind of developing this idea still of maybe we can get in the Olympics. And then when you were at 88, I was there also with freestyle, and that was the first Olympic year that it was a sport at the Olympics, but it was a demonstration sport, which is what they did during that time. We don't have demonstration sports anymore during the Olympics because it was a little too confusing. And now sports are a new sport is either in the Olympics or it's not quite in the Olympics, and it just comes in as a medal sport if it does. Yeah. But anyway, in 1988, it was a demonstration event. And so the timing of it just happened to work out for myself, that I was in kind of that second wave of, let's see if we can make this a true international sport, and let's get in the Olympics. And so I was part of that demonstration event in Calgary. And then in 1992, they decided, okay, that's moguls, let's make it a real medal event. And we'll do that in Albertville, France for 92 Olympics. And I was still going then. And that's when I went to the second Olympics. So I kind of see myself as a little bit of a start of the sport, but really kind of the second wave start of the sport.
Well, you know what? You're definitely part of an important leg of the sport, because, through your effort and those of the other people that you were racing with or against at that time, it became an Olympic sport. So kudos. So let's go back to the beginning, Nelson. I know you were born in New York, correct? New York State.
I grew up. Yeah, when I was pretty young. I was actually born in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, and then, but just for a couple of years, so I don't really remember it too much. And then our family moved to Buffalo, New York, and then Niagara Falls, New York, all when I was in grade school. And then we moved out to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, when I just out of grade school. So I was about 12 when we moved out here. Yeah,
and you learned to ski where? Where did you learn to ski?
I learned to ski in small hills in Western New York, Kissing Bridge, Holiday Valley, little places in Southern Ontario. So our family would go a couple times a year, and we would just go to those small hills in Western New York. We never ventured out west or did a big ski trip. My parents were very, twice a year kind of skiers, and would drag my sister and I.
So was that something that you really took to from the outset, or you just kind of grew into it?
I played hockey when I was really young, and that was, of course, big in that whole area as well. And so my friends were playing hockey, and we would do it on ponds, and we would do it at the rink. And my life was starting to revolve around hockey in the winter, even at that young age. And that's really what I loved. And, but then when we moved to Colorado, it was a change of job for my dad. And we did come out here for skiing. In other words, we came out here in other means, and there wasn't hockey at the time. And so I was kind of bummed. I thought, wow, this is a winter wonderland, and all this snow.
No hockey.
No hockey, yeah. This was in 1977 we moved out here. So, but they said, hey, we have lots of ski programs. So what kind of skiing do you want to do? And so I kind of scratched my head and thought, well, I kind of know how to ski. We've been a few times. And so I guess I'll sign up for skiing. And I was in the ski race program at first, and just started from there, really, because there wasn't hockey. It was sort of my second love that became my first love. And I just changed into it. And a lot of people say, hey, you started late, at 12, 13, 14 years old getting into it. But for me, it was kind of an extension of just winter sports, and it was ended up being a good fit.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that when you just started out, were you alpine skier, downhill skier? What discipline did you do?
Yeah. So I did downhill skiing. Really, the choice at the time for kids to get into it for a program. I think my mom wanted to get me into some program, not just kind of be out there recreation, but it's like, hey, you can take a real program and have a group of kids you could be with, and have a coach, and at least have some direction. So at the Winter Sports Club, which is an organization here in Steamboat, they had, at the time, they had either Nordic jumping, the big long jumps, or cross-country skiing, or alpine racing. So those were really the choices. And I thought, well, the Nordic jumping and cross-country, that seems, I don't know how to do that at all. So I guess I'll do alpine racing because I sort of know how to ski. And I think I can navigate the gates and learn how to stop a little bit better. So yeah, I just did alpine racing at first and did that for really only the first year. And then during that time, the freestyle program was just starting up. So there was a coach that had moved to town, Park Smalley, and his brother John, and they were kind of from that era that I was talking about, that 70s era of freestyle. And but they weren't competing anymore, but they wanted to start a freestyle program, which Moguls is part of freestyle. So they wanted to start that up within the Winter Sports Club. They said, hey, we know you have alpine racing and you have these Nordic events, but we'd like to show kids freestyle skiing and start a program with freestyle. So eventually they said, okay. And I was watching them. They started up that next year. And so I told my parents, hey, I'd like to switch and do freestyle and do Moguls instead.
So what was it about freestyle and Moguls? Because you don't strike me as a wild child. So what was it about that freestyling, thing about Moguls that drew you to it?
I think there was just more going on. I think there was more, it was not this, I mean, alpine racing is very challenging, but to me, it was always just around the gates. So whether you're doing slalom or giant slalom or downhill, to me, it was kind of just gates, making these same turns. Whereas the freestyle, I saw, they can ski Moguls and they can ski where they want and how they want. And then they can learn how to do these jumps, learn how to do tricks and jump off Moguls and, do tricks and aerials as part of freestyle also. So I wanted to learn aerials and do backflips and double backflips. And it just was more, it seemed like there was more going on. It was three-dimensional, if you will.
Yeah. So define or describe a Moguls for those of our listeners, viewers who don't know what a Mogul is.
Yeah, sure. So ski resorts, they groom the slopes most of the time, most of the places. You have nice groomed trails where they'll take snowcats and they have this groomer behind it that smooths out the snow and makes it very, very kind of mellow and smooth and nice to turn on. But then in places where they don't groom the snow, and that might be every night on some runs or every other night, they keep it really smooth. But other runs that are a little steeper, they'll leave alone and Moguls will form up just from people turning over and over and the slope not being groomed by a machine like that. And so the more it gets skied, the more chopped up it gets. And these Moguls, these kind of push piles of snow form and the skiers go between them and around them and through them in all different ways. But the more they ski it, kind of the rougher it gets and the more the Moguls build up and maybe it snows again and kind of fills them in, but then skiers will ski on them more and then it roughs them up more. And so that's just the natural progression of how Moguls or bumps, people call them, form up on a slope.
So, obviously, I guess it would be like the difference between driving on a smooth highway and a potted, off the road track kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something that's not taken care of. It's just left to the nature of all the skiers going through there. Yep, and forms up those bumps.
And if my memory serves me right, as I was reading about, kind of checking you out, researching you prefer the more natural kind of Moguls versus the more groomed courses?
Yeah, so just the evolution of the sport happened to be that they would have a course maybe set up for competition, but there weren't Moguls on it already. So it wasn't, maybe the snow conditions weren't quite right to form the Moguls, or there weren't enough skiers forming Moguls ahead of time. And so people kind of thought, well, what are we going to do? We have to get some Moguls on this course because we have a competition coming. And so they would take a snowcat out and with the blade of the snowcat start making Moguls.
Right.
And then the skiers would practice during the week, maybe before the competition, and ski it up more and form the Mogul lines that you go through and start forming the jumps that you go off of. And so it was just a way to get some Moguls on a slope that maybe didn't have Moguls yet and do it quickly.
Right.
And so from there, it's really progressed into now the Mogul courses that you see on television. If you see a World Cup or you see the Olympics, they're all made by a machine. They're all made by snowcats, and the moguls themselves are made and measured out, and the jumps are the same, also measured out and made and produced, and the landing areas for each of the jumps. There's 2 jumps going down the mogul course. The landing areas for those are all prepared, and the moguls are actually taken out of those sections so you can have a good landing spot, and then you ski back into the moguls. So it's just, so when I skied, when I first competed, it was all natural courses all the time. And then this problem arose kind of during those years of, hey, sometimes we have a course without moguls, let's make some. So it was kind of a combination, sometimes natural, sometimes machine made. And then towards the latter part of my career, and especially just after that, it all became man-made courses. And that's what you see now. So it's, I think just because what I grew up with was more natural, so I like that. Whereas kids now, of course, they grow up with machine-made courses, so they prefer those.
Yes, that makes sense. You know, so I read that when you were about 14 or 15, your mom was cleaning your room and found a note that you had written saying you wanted to be one of the top 5 skiers in the world. Now, obviously, you know, way superseded that. You actually became the best, as opposed to one of the best. When you were writing that down, Nelson, were the Olympics on your radar at the time, or you just wanted to be just a badass skier?
You know, the Olympics weren't really on my mind, and I think that was because where the sport was at the time, it wasn't quite Olympic yet, and I thought maybe it could be, but I didn't have this aspiration in my head of Olympic medalist or champion or person yet. I think because I started a little bit later, as a youngster, I always felt kind of behind. And so I always felt like I just need to do better, learn the tricks better, learn how to ski better. I always felt like that. I mean, even till the end, I felt like that.
Yeah.
I was always a little behind. So I was always pushing to try to catch up, you know, and do better. And, you know, maybe one day I'll be up there with these people. So I think probably when I wrote that note, I think we were doing I think maybe the coaches said, oh, you write down some goals, or, you know, turn in a sheet with some goals or something like that. And so I think that came from there. And so I don't remember specifically that one, but we would do that from time to time. And so I think after, it might've been somewhere around my first years of World Cup, where it was so difficult. And I, again, felt so behind. You know, here I am, kid from Colorado, which is a great place to grow up and compete in that whole ski world, but then to go into a World Cup where you have the best, obviously, in the world from all these different countries and all these different great ski areas.
Right. And
so again, feeling kind of behind and feeling like I'm not, like I'm there, but I'm behind. And always kind of chasing. So at the time, if I thought, you know, top 5 in the world was a big stretch for me, you know, going in is like 0 in the world.
Right.
So that was like, you know, way, way, way up there.
But that's interesting though. So you, as I said, you don't quite remember how you ended up writing that down, but maybe your coach had you do it. But you wrote down a goal. You said something important. It was really it was more than a stretch for you. And that's an important point for all of our listeners and viewers, that your goals have to be, you know, more than a stretch. You know, we've been using the word delusional. You have to be almost delusional to think that you can be a kid who just started learning skiing and end up being top 5 in the world, one of the best in the world. But talk to me about the importance of goals to you, Nelson, and also how important it is to write them down.
Yeah, it really is to be able to stretch like that and think. So it's one thing to think of the next trick I want to learn, or the next technique I want to learn as I was competing. But then it is a whole nother thing to put it out there as a goal and say, well, where am I going with this? So if I learn these things, if I perform well and do these things in competition, where does that take me? And so to specify a goal like that just solidifies that idea, or put something, a concrete end to it, and something to shoot for that's out there. And yeah, to me, top 5 in the world was out there when I was starting at 0. And it may have even, eventually I remember being 6th in the world a couple of years in a row. So I was close.
You're close, yes.
But it took a little while. So yeah, and then so to write those big goals, and then I remember, yeah, we would do them from time to time. Often we would write these down and fill out a whole sheet of goals, and some of them might be really specific technique things, or or speed. I want to be this kind of speed on these kind of courses, or I want to learn this jump, or kind of specific smaller goals. But then they would always ask on these sheets, or we'd make our own of those big goals of world champion, Olympic champion, or I want to be 3-time this or 2-time that, or I want to win more World Cups than anybody has, or something. You could put up these outrageous ones on there, and I think it would just be an important exercise to really stretch and throw it out there, and just even think about what may be possible.
Yeah, have something to work for, and knowing that it is possible, as I say, if you do some of the smaller and go after some of the smaller goals, that they kind of add up over time, though, because that's one of the things that most people tend to forget. The fact that you dream a goal and you write it down doesn't mean that it's going to happen overnight. You have to keep on pushing. You have to keep working at it, hitting those smaller ones, sometimes getting really close, like top 6, not top 5.
Right.
But I think taking solace in the fact that, I'm getting close. I was at 0, now I'm at top 6. So you can get there. For most athletes, winning, well, before I get to that, talk to me about your first overall World Cup title. So that was in 1988.
That was in 1988, yeah. And what I remember the most was I wanted to qualify for the Olympics. So that was, of course, the Olympic year, that 88. And we had, I believe we had a 2-year selection period. So in other words, the events in 1987 also counted towards Olympic qualifying of 88. So they would take the best. It was really, really small in 88. There were 2 of us from the US in that event in Calgary. So I knew that it was really, really tight. And yeah, before that, I was probably 6th in the world and behind a couple skiers from the US on that top 6.
Right.
And so I knew I had work cut out for me. And so my goal really was at that time was really to make the Olympics in 88. And so I worked really hard going up into 1987 and had a pretty good year in 87. But I may have been behind those 2 other skiers. And so knowing that I need to jump up some more in order to make it. So going into 1988 season, I thought, really, this is it. I have to give it, everything I have, and prepare the best I can, train the best I can, compete the best I can. And then maybe those results would come, and I really just wanted to make the Olympic team. And so, I ended up going into that Olympics leading the World Cup, which I had never done before. And had my first wins on the World Cup during that early season of 1988. And it was just a drive to make the team. And so I had enough points after the Olympics. So the World Cup season goes the whole year long, and the Olympics are kind of in the middle of it. So you can imagine there's these events leading up to the Olympics, and then we sort of take a break. The Olympics don't count for the World Cup. They're a separate event points-wise. Then we had a few more World Cups after the Olympics. So I had really enough points to stay on top, and ended up doing fairly well those World Cups after the Olympics, and ended up winning that season. So it was really just a byproduct of wanting to get to the Olympics in 88 that ended up winning that season.
No, and that's awesome. And again, instructive, I think, for all of us, because here it is, you started out just wanting to be top 5, but then comes what I'm going to describe now as a bigger goal to get to the Olympic Games. And that causes you to stretch even more, work even harder, be even more focused to get there. So I understand, the kind of mindset that you need to have to get to the Olympics and to compete at a really high level. Is it a letdown to go from the Olympics back to the World Cup circuit in the same season? What's the mindset like there?
Yeah, that is kind of a difficult one. Which I didn't foresee that would be the case until it was happening. So
Yeah.
Because you're gearing up, doing World Cups, leading up, and then the Olympics come, and of course it's this big thing, the biggest ever in my life at the time. And so then you go back to World Cup, it's still a big thing, but there is that, it's like,
Yes.
hey, where's all the,
where are the cameras and the lights?
Yeah, where's all the attention and all the
Yeah.
action? And yeah, exactly. And realizing that you're back from this huge break, this big thing that you just did back on the World Cup. But in the same token, the World Cup is still a big thing. And I wanted to finish that season strong. So it's a little bit difficult, but I always, as a skier, I always like that idea of it's the season. It's going to all these different places around the world and competing in these different venues and the weather and everything that goes along with it, and taking that whole season, and that's the season-long champion. I always like that idea, and I think maybe from appreciating other sports that do a similar thing that way. So we have this giant event in the middle, but I kind of like the idea. It was a little bit of a letdown, but also I like that idea, that concept of the World Cup.
Consistency over a long period of time.
Yeah, and who can sustain that whole year-long calendar and come on top at the end of it.
You're right, because that does require a different level of mental strength and mental effort. But so here you are, you're going to Calgary, leading the world and the World Cup circuit, the same guys you're going to be competing against at the Olympic Games. You end the year on top of the world as well, but you came out of Calgary without medals. What happened there?
Yeah, so that was tough. I mean, well, what happened also is my father was killed in a car accident just before the Olympics in 88. Yeah, and so we were in Japan we were doing 2 World Cups in Japan, and those were the last 2 before the games. And right after the first one, I got the horrible phone call from my mom and explaining what happened. He was killed in a car accident, and it just, that
must have been crushing. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that was crushing, and it still is. And so I was kind of on a little bit of autopilot maybe through the Olympics, as far as in my head, and not really wanting to be there, and in mourning for sure, and just kind of lost. And but again, there was so much training and so much buildup, and I was be able to get through most of it automatically. But it was a tough time for sure. Yeah. And as you could imagine. And so we had 2, I'm trying to remember, we had 2 runs in Calgary. So because it was such a small field, there was only 12 men skiers total in the whole event. They wanted to keep these demonstration events very small and not have that many athletes. It's not the full field. Maybe a full field of World Cup or Olympics now would be 60 or 70 men, but there were 12. So a pretty small and a short time frame event. But we had 2 runs, and the first run was just to seed the skiers to go in reverse order for the second run. And then it would come down to just that second run for the results, for the medals. And so I did all right I won the first run. And so I went last in the second run, and we waited and waited and waited and waited. I remember, I don't know what was going on TV or scoring, or it was, I think we took the last run at about 4:30 to 5 p.m. I mean, really, really late. Nobody really expected it. And I ended up, so I won the first run and waiting for all this stuff, and then went on the second run, and I just, everything was going along fine, but I just kind of skipped over a mogul a little bit too far than I expected, and ended up kind of landed this bump a little bit too far and not quite in control, and I just spun out, and immediately I was on my back, and I thought, oh man, this is over. I'm on my back.
Olympics.
Yeah, yep. So that was that. I ended up 10th. A couple other people crashed, and so out of the 12, I ended up 10th in those Olympics. And so it was heartbreaking for sure. I mean, to go in, leading the World Cup, and first Olympics, and then I lead the first run, and then end up crashing on the second run. So of course everything just floods back, and I feel like I don't want to be here anyway. And my dad just died, and my family's all there, and it's like, it could be this amazing, great thing, or it could be this horrible thing. And
So
so,
adversity, man, adversity strikes us, and obviously, leading into Calgary, one of the worst things that can happen is to kind of get that news that your parent, your dad, got killed, and that must, obviously, it was a shock to the system, and then to be leading halfway through and to be crashing. So it's kind of hilarious in a way, because when people watch Cool Runnings, they think only the Jamaican bobsledders crash. but you're proving that that's not so. And oftentimes I talk about the crash and how big a failure it is. Which so talk to me about the crashing, the expectation that you were going to win in Calgary and you didn't, you failed. Well, talk to me about that failure, and how do you deal with failure?
Yeah, it was devastating in a lot of ways. Because there's so many emotions, like feeling great to be there, to have made it, putting that big goal out there a year ahead of time, and then making it, and there you are with everybody. And so on that side, it feels wonderful. It feels like everything's happening just fine. And then on the other token, to crash and burn and be out of it, feels like, now what? Was this all worth it? What am I doing? I'm so depressed and lost, and do I continue? What's really going on? It's so many emotions. And then I think friends and family all being there too is really tough, just because they don't know what to say or what to do. And people say, oh, I'm sorry, or you were doing great, or you're such a, this or that, you're a good skier, you're such a great competitor, keep going, or they don't know what to do or what to say, and I don't either. And so it was really, really tough. And I was grateful that we did have the rest of the World Cup season. And I thought, if I can kind of do my thing and stay in there, and I still had that goal of that World Cup season. And I think without that, it would have been really, really tough. So say if that was the end of the year for me, I mean, I might have just stopped altogether.
Yeah, that would have been a bad way to end the year for sure. But I think the fact that you went on to compete in the rest of the World Cup circuit and won, and the fact that you're here telling the story as well, just reminds me that failure isn't fatal. It's not fun for sure. It is going to happen, but it's just one of those things that all of us have to deal with along the way. But here I am, telling the tale of our failures. Not many people can say they failed on the world stage, but wow, here both of us are, after the fact.
I think awesome. That's true. And I think more and more as we get older, we realize that more and more that failure is such a big part of life, and that's okay. It's okay to have those failures, and it's even better to have those failures, because then we learn and we move on, and we hopefully don't do those things again. Yes. And so I wish I knew that more when I was younger. At those times, I think I was 22 at the time, and instead of being so devastated, to think, hey, that was a huge failure, but that's okay. I'm in the arena. I'm doing this thing, and I'm here to compete, and failure is part of it. That's okay. Let's go.
Yeah, sometimes certainly in my early years, I think about that too. I describe that you don't pause long enough to smell the roses. You're so focused on the goal,
sure,
on that end point, that you fail to recognize all the other wonderful things that are happening around you, even in the midst of adversity.
Yeah, sure.
And
not to put your self-worth on it. I think that's a hard one too, especially being young. We want to, if we have a good result at the end of the day, we feel like, oh, we're worthy, we're something. And if we feel like we don't, we're not worthy. And that's a hard lesson to learn, that it doesn't matter. And your family, people love you anyway, and it doesn't matter.
It is part of the growth process, and you're absolutely right. It's again another. I want to stick a point here long enough so that this sinks in our audience that, hey, your self-worth should never be wrapped up in that end goal that you're striving to achieve, because you're still worthy. You're still, in fact, if you're striving to achieve a worthy goal, it means that you're a worthy person. You're you're valuable to other people, and you know that trophy isn't the be all and end all for sure. How long after Calgary Nelson was? How long was it the space between the Olympics in Calgary and the next World Cup race? I was curious.
It was quick. We didn't stay for closing ceremonies. We went on to the next place. So it was.
You missed a great party, man.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. I would have liked to party with you there.
Yeah, the closing ceremonies were great. So you had this devastating result, and you had to get right back into it.
Yeah, we were already back in Europe, I believe, that year. We were already back at it and had maybe 3-4 events, to finish that season. I think all through March. So we were already back to it.
So then you obviously repeated again in '89, and then you're off to Albertville, where it's now a full Olympic sport, and you're obviously still one of the top skiers in the world. You end up with a bronze. What was that a letdown for you?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, when you want to, again, goes back to those goals, of course. Olympic champion, Olympic gold medalist, that has the ultimate ring to it. Yeah. And I always thought Olympic bronze medalist, that's okay too, but it doesn't have the same ring. But it's not a very healthy way to look at it. It's a little bit of a kind of spoiled brat way to look at it.
That's a competitive nature in all athletes, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because people would say, "Oh, congratulations," and that's so great, and that's how how did that feel? And I always tell that, well, bronze and silver and gold sound better, and that is the competitive nature. That's all that is.
That is true. Yeah.
Carmichael of the USA, 10th and 88. Now is his moment. Can he be gold in 92?
Nice helicopter up there on top, Greg. I think anything less than gold for Nelson at this point will not be good enough, so he's going to pull out all the stops here. Watch these knees go to work.
Feeling his way down. This is like braille, speed braille. Reading it with your toes.
Look at the deflection there. Knees banging back and forth from inside of those bumps. Now here's where it's all going to come to a head. Nice twister spread. If he lays this one down, it could be a high score run in the run to beat.
Nelson Carmichael, 32.05. Nobody else has been faster than that. How will they judge the air and turn? Night in Teen, the French and American flags were raised over the Alps.
The fact of the matter is, as an Olympian, you're in an elite club, and as an Olympic medalist, it's even more rarefied air.
Yeah, it really is, and I had to be reminded of that actually right when it happened. The president of the ski association for the U.S. was with us. He was our team leader really for those Olympics, and he was with us on the ride to the medal ceremony, which was just down in the ski village where we had the event. And so it was a couple hours just after the hill, and I was excited, but also like, oh, there's second and first still out there, and I missed them. I made a couple mistakes, and there it went. And he reminded me just what you said right then about just kind of, hey, how rare this is, and be proud of everything that's happening, because it is so rare and so exceptional. And he really kind of put me right back on my put it right back to me,
Yeah, but the thing I noticed with us as human beings, and especially when you're ultra competitive, is that we have a tendency to beat ourselves up. Things didn't go quite the way we wanted it, we intended. And the only thing we can think of is to belittle and berate ourselves, as opposed to looking at so we mess up on one thing, we did 99 things really great.
Right.
But that one mistake we allowed to overshadow the 99 things that we did great. So dude, I haven't made it anywhere near the podium yet, so congratulations. I've tried 3 times.
I know, you've been there 3 times.
So that's awesome. But I know, and it's kind of interesting, because here we are talking about how special winning even the bronze is. But for you, winning the World Cup titles was even more special to you?
Yeah, and again, I think that comes from being a skier and knowing that that's the sport. I had this championship kind of mindset always during those strong years. Yeah, and so in '88, as I said, it was really I won that year as a byproduct of just wanting to make the Olympics, and then that meant I had good results, and so I hung on and won that year, and super exciting for sure. And then going into '89. To be able to defend that, I thought, wow, now I'm in a position where you go in and do your best to defend a title.
Yeah, the bullseye is on your back.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, yep, exactly. But then I didn't have that Olympic champion kind of bullseye, so I could still be a little bit under the radar and still kind of have that feeling of I'm behind and I've got to fight, because the Olympic champions are there, and there's always younger kids, of course, that are better and stronger and faster, and they're all starting to come up. And so I'm trying to keep these young kids at bay, I felt like, and still try to catch up with these older people that I feel like are still really, really good, and to be able to defend the title. So that was where it all came together, really. I felt like was that '89 season. And I just really wanted to be very, very consistent, I didn't really have a number in mind, like, hey, I've got to be top 3 every weekend or top 5 every weekend, or I have to win X amount of events. I just thought be really, really consistent. And so that came into the training a lot of just train to be consistent. So kind of no matter what, I had this idea that I was prepared and I was ready, and I could do a consistent run almost every time. And that was the most important to me, because I knew I had that whole season to go. In order to win that season, that's what it would take.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned it again, that you felt like you were behind. You're always trying to catch up, right? So certainly there were what I'm going to describe as your peers that you were competing against, that you somehow felt that you're behind them. And then you mentioned the young kids who were coming up that you're trying to hold off. And do you realize now, you probably weren't thinking about it then, that those young kids probably felt that they were behind you trying to catch up?
Yeah, I suppose so. I didn't think of it that way at the time. I just thought they're naturally so good, and they're young, and they're just feeling it and going. And I thought, gosh, yeah, I'm sort of in the middle here. How do I chase and also keep them at bay and keep and stay in there?
But I think what's great about that line of thinking, Nelson, is that it kept you hungry, it kept you motivated. And I think, any mental trick that we can use to keep ourselves going, working hard, working consistently, as you just said, to produce the results,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. That was, I think looking back, it was a good spot to be in. I didn't want to feel like I had won everything and now I just have to go down and ski and just it would automatically happen. I never felt like that, and I didn't want to feel like that. I felt like
complacency. You're right. If you become complacent, then you're on your way to failure. Absolutely.
Yeah, always something to chase and push towards.
So I know as I said earlier, you have had an amazing career, but I also know that you enjoy giving back. You give a lot of free moguls clinic in steamboats. What other causes are you involved in?
Really around here. I mean, there's so much to be involved with here and around the country, some too. Like we did the military tours, which was really fun, and to give back in that kind of a way, in an international way, was those are fun too. But to be able to do things locally. So I do these free mogul clinics up on the ski area. And so just for visitors that come and they may be good skiers on the smoother slopes, but they want to learn more about, how do I tackle these bumps and stay in control and kind of stretch in their ability a little bit and push themselves to go down something steeper and harder. And so I do these free clinics. Anybody can show up and I just show them some things and spend about an hour with them and send them on their way with some things to work on. But I also do things with the Winter Sports Club here that I mentioned. So when I was a youngster and I was involved in the club and a kid in the club, there's lots of ways. They have lots of fundraisers and ski days and functions to be able to help really raise money for them. They're always struggling to keep the prices low so that kids can come in, and they don't have, skiing is an expensive sport anyway. And then if they're involved in these competition programs, you can imagine it's even more expensive. So always lots of fundraising efforts to try to keep the coaching fees low and the travel fees lower, and they have scholarship funds. And so yeah, different events to try to raise money for them. And then there's also another good organization here called STARS, which is an adaptive sports program. So people that they may have been hurt in battle, like wounded warriors, or they may have cognitive issues or other physical disabilities. And there's a great program here that gets them out. They go horseback riding, or they'll go water skiing, or they'll go snow skiing, and they'll ride bikes, do all kinds of things. And it's a great spot to do that. And people come from all over the country and really learn that they can, all the things that they can do that maybe they thought were out of touch or out of reach before with a disability. And yeah, so that's a good program to be involved with too. So it's amazing how just right around here in Steamboat, there's a lot of things to be able to give back to.
Cool. Why is it so important though for you to give back?
It just, I think to help people realize they can do more, they can do anything, that there's no limits, there's no lid, there's not a top to anything. We can all do whatever we want, which is amazing. And so I think just to be able to help that or show that in a small way, I mean, if I can give a little time towards that, I'm happy to do it. It feels natural.
Awesome. So skiing, giving back, and I know you have a wonderful, young family. How is family life now that you're not, traipsing around the world?
Yeah, family life is good. It's busy. It's busy for sure. I have one son who's a little bit older, and he's in college, Noah, and he's almost graduating college, which is great, with media production. So he's excited about that, and he snowboards, and he loves to do that. Doesn't compete, but he loves to be up in the mountains snowboarding and doing his music and his media. And then, we have two little ones. So Caroline was Olympian also, and with alpine racing, and 3 Olympics, and is very accomplished skier for sure. And now we have 2 little ones. We have Freya, who's 3, and a little guy, Hugo, who's just 7 months. So it's busy at home.
So you have a little Olympic family going on there.
Yeah, I know people ask, well, are they going to do alpine? Are they going to do freestyle? What's going on? So
that's going to be an interesting household once they grow older, especially if they decide to compete.
Yeah. So who knows what'll happen? Of course, we don't know. Everyone's our own individuals, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So what else are you up to these days, Nelson?
So then I'm slowly developing this clothing line called Nelson Colorado. And so it's ski and snowboard clothing and some gloves and accessories. And I've always been interested in design and having some business within the ski snowboard world, the outdoor world. So putting this line of clothing together. Yeah. So that's the latest venture.
Awesome. So are those clothing and apparel available now?
The gloves are, we have some mittens and gloves that are, and then the apparel, not quite. So still working on prototypes and samples and outerwear. So really design men and women, eventually have some kids, and all for skiing and snowboarding, and pretty performance oriented, but also sold direct to the public. So the idea is, with online sales these days, the way they are, people can just go direct and really save half the money as opposed to if they went into a retail store and bought the same thing. So that's the program, and that's the idea. Awesome.
And so where can we get some of those gloves?
So nelsoncolorado.com.
nelsoncolorado.com.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. So so for those of you who are there and you love skiing, you love snowboarding, make sure you check out nelsoncolorado.com. My man has some amazing stuff, and you're going to look good. And because you're wearing his stuff, you're going to skate really well as well. I'm sure. I'm sure of it. So That's pretty cool. But wow, dude, it's been awesome, man. It's great to see you again, granted.
Yeah, you too, Devon, for
over
sure.
The ether. Thank you for all that you do. I'm not so sure I'll be joining any of your free moguls clinics.
You never know.
To send me the videos.
Yeah, you never know. You got to come on out to Colorado.
Yes, I guess so. But congratulations again on all the amazing accomplishments. Thanks for being such a good example of what it means to set goals that stretches you, and then to not just to set the goals, but to put the work in consistently and to push yourselves to achieve them. You've done awesome, my friend. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experiences, and keep on pushing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Devon. Yeah, it's an honor. It's great to see you again. And yeah, I still tell people stories about some times we were together, and just mentioned, of course, Jamaican bobsled, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's always exciting. Yeah,
it's all good, man. So give my love to Caroline.
Yeah, will do.
All
right, thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you click on that subscribe button and hit that bell. You'll get a notification every time we post a new video. And don't forget, share it with your friends, man. They want to be inspired as well, right? So share it. Don't keep it. And before you go on to the next video, visit my website, www.devonharris.com. Keep on pushing.